You actually didn't have anything to eat for breakfast. Did you eat something?
I had a box of Kraft Dinner, extra creamy, and I had a can of Diet Coke. So I'm sorted, man. That's perfect breakfast. Welcome back, DP Review TV viewers. Chris Nichols here, and today we're coming to you from the Calgary Farmers Market. And right now we're in the Innisfail Growers Market stall. Beautiful produce. There's like hot pickled carrots, like Jordan's going nuts for them. And we're playing with, of course, a brand new camera today. It's the Fuji X-T4. Now I should mention that Jordan is also shooting on an X-T4 today, completely handheld. But I also need to mention that these are very early models, so we're getting a lot of bugs and a lot of strange stuff going on.
Back to work.
Okay. Now, when I first picked up the X-T4, I thought it actually looked quite a bit different than the X-T3, which is crazy because side by side, they actually look very similar. I'm going to talk about that more later, but it might have just been the wider panel on the EVF here. It reminded me almost like an XH1, but really this is the exact same EVF as far as I can tell. It's still 3.69 million dots, although Fuji say they have tweaked the optics in it. But when it comes to the actual handling of the camera, it's actually almost identical, but they've switched a few things around and they've refined a few things for sure. The grip is definitely wider. You'll notice that when you pick it up. And I really like that they moved the function button back here, which I always thought was almost impossible for human hands to operate, to the front here. So that's nice. But we still have our exposure comp, our shutter speed dial, our ISO dial controls, all in very similar, very familiar positions. Now the AF on, the quick menu, and the automatic exposure lock buttons have actually all changed places. The quick menu button is now where the autofocus lock used to be. That's out of there. We have an auto exposure lock button where the AF on button used to be, and now of course AF on button is up in the top left corner. And I'm finding it very easy to use. I think maybe if you had an X-T3 and an X-T4, you might get confused, but you can customize those back to whatever you want them to do. Now of course we also have a fully articulating back panel. We're going to talk about that more separately, but the last thing I want to point out, right under the shutter speed dial, we used to have a metering selector switch, which honestly, me personally, I never even touched, never even used. I think a lot of people out there leave the metering on evaluative and just let it do its thing and exposure compensate from there. So I'm not sorry or sad to see that go. Instead, we have a selector switch to go between movie mode and still mode. And seeing as how the X-T4 and a lot of the Fuji cameras in general are really pushing for that hybrid video stills camera territory, I think that's a smart move. Now, the XH1's big claim to fame was that it had IBIS built in, and this is super useful for a hybrid stills and video camera. The X-T4 also has this now. And testing it out, Fuji says it's roughly 6.5 stops. But first off, keep in mind, different lenses will give you different results based on how much coverage they have, whether they have image stabilized as well, and many other factors. So I did test this here, and I was getting, 1/8 of a second very usable, 1/4 of a second not bad, 1/2 of a second I just can't seem to get it sharp. And so this seems very comparable for my skills, how I use other cameras and what results I'm getting. Other thing to keep in mind that this is pre-production, so who knows, it might get better. This is what we're getting using an 1855 image stabilized lens at a 50mm equivalent. Now, the brand new camera, we also actually get a brand new battery. It's an NP235. Never seen this before, although it does look a lot like classic Sony or Panasonic camcorder batteries, but I don't think those will work in there. So we are seeing big improvements in battery life. Now, this is a pre-production camera, and keep in mind that we don't like to shoot in economy mode. This actually has a normal power mode and also a performance boost mode. So I'm not sure what we'll get there, but it should definitely be a lot more than what we got on the X-T3. Now, you can charge this battery with a wall charger, but they don't give it to you. You have to buy it separately. It's a dual battery charger, and that'll be nice if you start collecting a bunch of these. But otherwise, it does charge right through the camera in USB-C. Now, of course, the X-T4 has all of the latest Fujifilm simulation modes, and it has a brand new one. It's got an Eterna profile. It's bleach bypass. I don't like the look of it. I don't think Jordan does either, but we're talking super high contrast, really low saturation. It's a weird look, but it's there if you want to play with it. And it just brings up a few thoughts. So first off, more than ever, more Fuji simulation modes is great, but I really wish I could customize which simulation modes show up in my menu so that I don't have to go through the entire list. The other thing that kind of reminds me of is, are we gonna see a lot of these things come to the X-T3, or are you gonna have to get an X-T4 to get all this stuff? Now, we're all on the topic of JPEGs. I also want to mention they've tweaked a little bit that if you go into curves and you want to change your JPEG contrast in a more localized fashion, you have half-stop increments instead of just full-stop increments, and you have the sharpness and the clarity and all that kind of stuff. But keep in mind, for our sample galleries, we don't mess around with that stuff because we want to just give you guys stuff straight standard out of camera. So you've got the same 26 megapixel APS-C sensor you see in a lot of the high-end Fujis. It's a much beloved sensor, arguably one of the best APS-C sensors money can buy right now. We've seen lots of samples, images over our videos shooting on these cameras, and we do like the characteristics. One of the main standouts, of course, is that very fast read speed. So if you're doing electronic shutter photography, you won't get weird diagonals. If you're doing video, you're not going to get strange rolling shutter effects. So it's a really, really nice characteristics. But actually what is more impressive to me on this particular camera for photography is not the electronic shutter capabilities, but the mechanical shutter. So Fuji's managed to make this new shutter shoot 15 frames per second with continuous tracking autofocus. That's pretty amazing. On top of that, they're rating it for 300,000 shots, so they're absolutely trying to target high-end professionals who are going to shoot this camera day in and day out. And for me personally, it's very stable feeling, it's well dampened, and it's almost silent. It's incredibly quiet. So overall, really cool new feature. Okay, so if you have a fully articulating screen, what do?
You vlog, baby.
You vlog. So we're going to talk about it here. It's a 1.62 million dot panel. I do like the fact that it's fully articulating, although I do get that a lot of photographers might actually prefer the more central position of the screen for photography, a la X-T3.
Yeah, but the X-T3 is still going to be available. So.
Yeah, and I never really liked that system. This works a lot better, especially videographers are going to love this. Now, I did get out the day before, just did some sports and action shots, try to test out the camera, but remember, this is pre-production, it's kind of buggy, so I can't really evaluate it fully right now. But I will say this, it felt very familiar to an X-T3 experience. I felt it did a very good job with face and eye detect, exactly as I expected it to, and I do like that the interface is better, especially the wide tracking mode. You go to that, you now get a solid box, put it on your subject, and it's very sticky. It seems to be recognizing pattern and color very well, and yeah, I just found it was a lot more like the experience you get with a lot of the other major players, and so that's a nice refinement. Again, worked great. So I do see one quirk here with the tracking system that Fuji has implemented. If I've got face detect activated, it will jump to people's faces even though I'm trying to track a different object, and that can be annoying. Now, other companies have this issue as well, but they usually let you customize in the menu to do that or to not do that. With the Fuji, I can though very simply set a quick key. I just had the one next to the shutter set to turn on and off face detection, and then that rectified the issue quite easily. So as a photographer, this is pretty much just bringing IBIS and better battery life to the table, but if you're into video, that's another story. Here's Jordan.
Yes, we finally got the flip screen and the IBIS that'll make the X-T4 a very capable vlogging camera. You've all been requesting it, it's available now, but I gotta be honest, vlogging's not for every day. So okay, for starters, everything we loved about the X-T3 is still on this. We've got that great 26 megapixel sensor, which is wonderful for video because there's very minimal rolling shutter when you're using that. As well, we still get 10-bit 420 internal recording up to 60 frames per second. It's H.265, so a little hard on your editing machine, but there's lots of flexibility in post, especially if you use the Eterna or the F-Log profiles that are available. So then what's new is the IBIS, and it's very effective for stills, and the XH1 stabilizer was good for stills as well, but it had a lot of weirdness when you were shooting video. It always seemed like it was fighting you when you were doing a pan or a tilt or walking with the camera. They've made a lot of effort to really smooth that out with the X-T4 now, and I did really enjoy shooting it at the farmer's market. A lot of pans, a lot of walking shots. It just looks a lot more natural. You do still see the occasional little shutter on it, so I prefer the Panasonic or Olympus systems, but again, this is still an early pre-production camera. Maybe they'll have those kinks ironed out. There's a few other improvements with this. The headline one is we can record 1080 at 240 frames per second. And I mean, we were using an FS700 almost 8 years ago because we wanted that 240p capability. It's so weird that for mirrorless cameras right now, it's the X-T4 or the GH5S. So if you're doing wildlife or sports and you want that really good slow motion, this does offer it to you. Now, it's not quite as sharp as the 120 mode, but it's still quite usable. What's really useful now is we have completely separate exposure and menus when you're in stills or when you're in video. Keeps everything totally separate, and it's great if you're going to jump back and forth between them. You're not constantly resetting your color profiles or dialing in your shutter speed again. So they addressed most of my concerns with the X-T3, but there's still a few things missing. The biggest one, they actually removed the headphone jack on this, which is a real shocker. Now, I do love that Fuji allows you to use the USB-C port to get headphone out, so you do still have an option, or you can use the battery grip, does have a headphone out on it, but really it's a pain that they pulled it off. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a more video-centric model that still had that. As well, it's still a micro HDMI port on it. Guys, you saved a little bit of space pulling off the headphone jack. Maybe you could have given us a mini or even a full-sized HDMI port. That would have been great. And I'd love to see a few more assist tools, things like waveforms, vector scopes, or shutter angles included. We've been asking for them for a long time, and Fuji still hasn't delivered. So right now, if you're looking for a Super 35 camera, I mean, there's a few cinema cameras that are a little more capable than this, but as a mirrorless, this is currently the best thing out there. Comparing it to something like Panasonic's GH line, yes, those give you more assist tools, but the Fuji gets you that wonderful phase detect autofocus that just keeps getting better. So I would say this is easily one of the best hybrid video cameras on the market right now.
All right, conclusion time. From a photographic standpoint, this is a state-of-the-art APS-C camera, absolutely, but it doesn't bring that much extra to the table over the X-T3 other than things like the articulating screen, battery life, and built-in IBIS. I mean, this really absolutely makes the X-H1 completely obsolete. From a photographic standpoint, I think the X-T3 still has a lot of play, and I think it's still going to be very popular, especially because it's a lower price point. But if you were looking for the best of the best, or you wanted, a fantastic hybrid APS-C stills and video solution, this would be a very good choice. This is going to really put a lot of pressure on the Sony a6600, and that might be an interesting fight to try in a future video. Hopefully you guys found this early look helpful. Please check out our Instagram and Twitter. Go to dpreview.com. You can see all the full specs there and our sample gallery from this camera. And I look very forward to testing out a full production version and seeing what the best of the best APS-C camera can really offer.